Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Is it a simple massage or not? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. When things started to change, it wasn't something big or earth-shattering, just a lot of little changes that began happening more and more often. At that time, I had been married to Jane for 15 years. She was 37, and I was 42. If you had asked me then whether our marriage was good, I would have answered, absolutely. But I was a very calm person and had few demands on life. My name is Zachary Scott Taylor, Zach to friends and enemies. I enjoyed the little things that made up my week, watching my favorite TV show, reading a good book, spending time with Jane and the kids, and relaxing together. Even cooking was something I enjoyed. For me, it was like a chemistry experiment where you mix a little of this and a little of that and wait to see what happens. I don't want to brag, but it almost always turned out very well. Jane and, especially, the children, Jim, who was 10, and Alice, who was 8, really enjoyed my dishes. I loved my wife and children, and I was sure they loved me. This was what I wanted from life, so yes, I was pleased. Did my job and the people I worked with irritate me sometimes? Certainly. Did I wish we could afford to travel and vacation more? Undoubtedly. Did I want to persuade Jane to go camping and fishing? Yes, but I gave up on that idea years ago. Above all, I wanted harmony in my family life and tried to get along with Jane, even if, more often than not, she got what she wanted, not me. But before things started to change, these were just small things, questions like what clothes to buy for the kids, what color to paint the house, what furniture to buy, what TV shows to watch, although the invention of the VCR had alleviated this problem somewhat, and what restaurant to go to for dinner. Some things seemed unfair and a little annoying to me, like the fact that I was always doing the grocery shopping, but she did most of the laundry. I cooked most of the food, but she cleaned the kitchen, although, for some reason, the floors became my responsibility alone. When it came to gardening and minor repairs, that was completely my territory. There was no division of responsibilities there, it was a man's job, but housework became a job for both of us. But like I said, I was happy enough, and there were many moments of pure joy, when the kids and I had fun together playing, or when I found a great fantasy book and could immerse myself in it and forget about reality for a while. But did you notice that I didn't mention intimate among these moments of joy? Oh yes, there were moments in the first 5 years of our marriage that I remember with pleasure, but after we had children, we began to do it less and less. The first small change I suddenly noticed was in our finances and banking. We had a joint account into which our salaries were deposited. She had a checkbook, and I had a checkbook. This was before computers and the internet, so we had to tell each other every time we wrote a check so we could record it in the check register and know how much money was in the account. This way, we wouldn't write unscheduled checks. But suddenly, Jane started forgetting to report certain checks to me, and this ended up resulting in several NSF checks, for which we had to pay a large fine. This upset me because it was money we could have spent on other things. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich enough to pay NSF fines every month, not to mention how it affected our credit rating and so on. For some reason, Jane didn't think it was a big problem. She was angry that I was angry with her over such nonsense, yes, such nonsense that she couldn't stop doing it. Eventually, it got to the point where, when she was in the shower or sleeping, I would go into her purse and take her checkbook to check her register. This solved the NSF problem, as I now knew how much money we had and transferred money from savings if we didn't have enough. The problem of what she spent the money on, however, was not solved. I'd ask her why the check was written to a restaurant I'd never been to, and she'd say something like she was having lunch with some girls from work. I found another receipt for some store, and she said that she didn't remember, she just bought some clothes that she needed. Other checks were made out to cash because she needed pocket money, but with no explanation as to how she spent it, vague explanations that didn't really say anything. Then ATMs appeared, and Jane began withdrawing cash instead of writing checks. She said it was easier to pay cash for things instead of writing a lot of checks. I could still keep track of the balance because she was recording the cash withdrawals in a ledger, but now I really had no way of knowing what she was spending it on. Then I got a new job, and money problems were no longer so important. I was doing something I liked better with people I enjoyed being around, and to top it all off, I got a raise of $1,600 a month. I was happier than ever and really enjoying life. It seemed like I was finally earning more than Jane could spend. But then came the next small change. On Jane's 38th birthday, she started to panic because she was approaching the dreaded 40. Of course, I had already been through that, so it wasn't a big deal for me. Life goes on, you know? But Jane, in her unique style, decided to give herself a birthday present, of course, without consulting me, although she would need my help. She joined a health club a few miles from home and wanted to set a schedule to go there at least 3 times a week. Now, you must understand that I still found Jane extremely attractive. Her face was well preserved, and I thought she looked 4 or 5 years younger than she was. Yes, she had gained 25 pounds since we got married, and her breasts weren't as perky anymore, but she still looked great in clothes and really good without them. Let's just say she still turned me on when I looked at her. But Jane was convinced she looked old and ugly. I was a little shocked when she simply told me that it had already been decided and that she had already bought herself a 6-month membership. But after thinking for a minute or two, I said, "That's great. I could lose 15 myself. I'll join you, and we can work out together." No. Wrong. She was going to go at least twice a week, and someone needed to stay home with the children. Guess who? This puzzled me a little. She acted like she didn't want me around. Had I offended her in some way? But as I said, life goes on, and I went along with it. Damn, I loved being with the kids. It wasn't a big burden. It just seemed that more and more often, Jane was no longer included in our family activities. So while she was at the health club, if the weather was good, I would take the kids to the park, and we would play on the playground. Sometimes we would throw a ball or a frisbee, and every time before going home, I forced them to walk with me for half an hour straight. Since these trips to the park took up a lot of time in the evenings, I started cooking less complex meals with lighter ingredients and faster cooking times. I became the king of stir-fries and salads. Sometimes we would stop at a grocery store on the way home and get a turkey salad. Once the kids got over their initial reluctance to leave the TV and video games, I think they really began to look forward to our outings. Somehow we still managed to get home before Jane. She would arrive around 9 o'clock in the evening, saying she spent time in the jacuzzi and sauna after training and then took a shower. However, she spent more than 3 hours at the club. I have to admit that she was losing weight. She weighed herself on the weekends and made us all come and praise her for her good work. For the first couple of weeks, she lost 3 pounds a week. By the 3rd week, she had only lost 1 pound and was angry. She said she was going to hire a personal trainer for a month or 2 to help her continue losing weight. Again, no conversation with me about whether we could afford it or if it was okay. No, these days, Jane did what she wanted without asking for permission. By the way, a personal trainer costs $140 per session. But don't worry, Jane, I can always earn more. By the 4th week, she had lost 3 pounds again and said, "See, honey, it was worth it, just like I said." Worth it for her, maybe. Like I said, I was happy with the way she looked before. And oddly enough, I also stepped on the scale. Without paying anyone a penny, I lost 8 pounds that month, only 2 less than she did. All it took was a little aerobic exercise and watching my calories. The kids looked great too. They were toned and had lean, muscular little bodies with seemingly unlimited energy. By the 5th week, she had only lost 2 pounds. She just couldn't understand it. She went to the club 4 times that weekend, in her opinion, had more to lose. Maybe it was because of the ice cream she ate late at night after returning home. I knew that if I hinted at this, I would hear a lot of dissatisfaction, so I remained silent. I, too, was learning to harmonize with the new Jane, but this required more and more effort. We were skating on thin ice, and it seemed like we could drown at any moment. The next small change occurred in the 6th week. Suddenly, I noticed that Jane began to go to bed later than usual. I would fall asleep in bed and hear the TV playing in the living room. Jane always recorded the soap opera on a VCR and watched it when she returned home. But now, she was recording 3 soap operas and watching them every night like a zombie, after she ate her big bowl of ice cream. But the real shock was that she weighed herself that Saturday and lost 5 pounds in 1 week. How the hell did this happen? I knew from reading that 3 to 3.5 pounds was the maximum rate at which you could lose fat. Maybe she just lost a lot of water. Naturally, Jane was delighted and planned to continue with the personal trainer, to whom she attributed all the credit. When I asked how much money she had already spent on the trainer, Jane got angry again and said, "Why does it matter? It's my money from my job, and I'll spend it however I want." Well, if she used a trainer each time, 4 times a week at $40 per session, that's $160 a week. She only made $770 every 2 weeks. As far as I could tell, she was already spending every cent of that amount, and more, on clothes, shoes, dinners with girlfriends, and the expensive cosmetics she needed to look young. But be silent, be quiet, and maybe you'll get yours. From the moment I started going to bed before her, we didn't have a night all week. Actually, come to think of it, we haven't done it in 3 weeks. No wonder I was on edge. Things didn't get any better that night when I tried to start something in bed and again couldn't get her away from the TV. Now, I was starting to get angry. We both looked better, had more energy, and yet I couldn't get into him. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. as usual. It was Sunday, and I knew Jane wouldn't get up until noon to make up for all the hours of sleep she'd lost watching soap operas. The next day, the kids had the day off from school for teacher training, and I had already taken the day off from work to be with them. Okay, I thought, she always does what she wants without asking me, so today the shoe will be on the other foot. I quickly woke up the kids and told them to get dressed in jeans, t-shirts, and sneakers. Then I gave them one of their mother's duffel bags and told them to pack swimsuits, 2 pairs of shorts, and 2 t-shirts with the same set of underwear. "Why, Dad? Where are we going?" they asked. "Today, my children, we're going to the lake. We'll rent a house, and then we'll fish, swim, and have fun." They liked the idea and quickly began to prepare. I took out the cooler and filled it with bottles of water, soda, juice, and ice. Then I packed my things, collected all my fishing gear, and we hit the road. It was about a 3-hour drive, and if we drove without stopping, we would be there by 9 o'clock. But we were on vacation, so I was in no hurry. We stopped at a roadside cafe and had a good breakfast before continuing on our way. Traffic was very light, and we had a good time on the road, arriving at the lakeside cabins around 9:30 a.m. I had been here many years ago before I got married. Everything had changed beyond recognition. Everything had been completely redone and modernized. There were still wooden cabins, but now they were made of beautiful light pine and had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a large walk-in shower, and a very large combined living and dining area. Everything had a country feel but was beautifully done and had all the modern amenities. Clearly, this place was planned with family fun in mind. One of the bedrooms had a king-sized bed, and the other had 2 bunk beds, sleeping 4 people. Guess who got the big bed? I was grateful as I looked around that there was no TV, no stereo, no radio, yes, peace and quiet. Let's do something different after all, there was a beautiful lake here. Seeing how well everything was set up, I decided, to hell with it, we'll stay 2 nights. The kids and I could just take a sick day on Tuesday. After checking in at the main office, I received a map of the place, and we started looking around. The kids were so excited that I had to spend some time trying to calm them down a little. The resort had a lodge with 10 rooms for rent and about 20 cabins scattered here and there. Most of the cabins were the same size as ours, but there were 5 or 6 2-story cabins that were a little larger. There was a large swimming pool near the main office, as well as an enclosed swimming area on the lake with a large platform floating on pontoons in the middle. Next to the swimming area was a fishing pier that extended 60 feet into the lake. There were railings, wooden benches, and lanterns for night fishing. Further on a small peninsula, there was a marina where boats were available for rent and fishing bait was advertised. We returned from the lake along a different path and passed a wide playground with volleyball and badminton nets. There was even a softball field with bases and stops. Just before we got back to the lodge, there was a small sandy play area with swings, a slide, and a wooden climbing fort. The kids started playing right away, and I could see they would happily stay busy for an hour or more. While they were doing this, I went to the main office and called home on their phone. It was already 11 o'clock, and I decided that Jane should be awake by now. Unfortunately, she was furious when I told her where I was and that we wouldn't be home for a couple of days. I just let it go in one ear and out the other. Yes, that's right, as if she actually cared where we were and what we were doing. She just got mad because I didn't bow or ask her permission first. Well, kiss my fifth place, Your Majesty. I just got so angry that I didn't care if she liked it or not. When she was exhausted and there was a pause, I quickly gave her the name of the place, their phone number, our cabin number, and directions to get there. I then told her that she could come out and join us. I mentioned the king-size bed and said there was plenty of room. Well, there wasn't much she could say at that point, but she didn't want to come. I had fun telling her about it, so I assured her that there was no camping here and that it looked like a very nice motel with all the amenities. Now, she was getting defensive and a little flustered, and she retreated, muttering an apology. The main reason she gave was that she couldn't dare miss a single workout at the health club. I bet. I've always liked women who had clear priorities. After that was done, I gathered the kids and we went to the restaurant on the resort grounds. It was a very nice place in a beautiful log building with neat border-type decorations. We had burgers and fries, and the kids loved it. Afterward, I insisted that we return to the cabin, put away our things, and then lie down and read for about an hour. One of the things I tried to do as I spent more time with my kids was to get them interested in reading, nothing heavy, just fun children's books. But I knew that once they got into reading, it would become a lifelong habit that would benefit them greatly. I didn't think I was that tired or sleepy, but the next thing I remember was the kids shaking me and complaining that they wanted to go swimming. Deciding to play with their little minds, I spoke in a low, rough voice and said, "Don't they know better than to wake up a bear when he's trying to hibernate?" Then I jumped up very quickly, grabbed one with each hand, and threw them on the bed. The bear became a tickle monster, and they laughed so hard they cried. Damn it, I was the big bear, the alpha male. I decided what we should do, so yeah, go put your suits on, and let's go swimming. The only people at the pool were a very attractive young blonde woman and her 2 children. I introduced myself as the kids ran into the pool, screaming and laughing. Her name was Marcia, and she was the daughter of the resort owners. She said she was separated from her husband and was trying to decide whether to file for divorce. She was currently living at the resort. I didn't want to go into the details of their troubles, but I learned that she was 27 years old and her children were 4 and 5 years old. She got married at 19, and he was her high school sweetheart. As I told her the details of my sad story, I couldn't help but glance at her. Damn, she was beautiful, natural long blonde hair, dark blue eyes, and a body to die for in a yellow bikini. She was about 5 feet 4 inches tall, with long, slender legs. She didn't seem to mind my wandering eyes, and as I did so, she had a knowing smile on her face. These were the kind of women who always knew they were attractive to the opposite intimate and were accustomed to attention. But as we talked a little more, I decided that she wasn't arrogant at all. In fact, she had a pleasant, gentle, and sweet personality. Our kids seemed to get along great too, which was unusual. My kids seemed to adapt to her kids' play and showed them games like diving for a quarter at the bottom of the pool and tossing a beach ball back and forth. They took great care of the little ones and tried not to let them fall into deep water. All in all, my little family had a fabulous day at the pool and was a little tired when we returned to the cabin to wash up and get ready for dinner. After a nice shower, we all laid back on my bed and fell fast asleep. This time, I woke up first and noticed that the sun was low in the sky and starting to set. Looking at my watch, I was shocked to see that it was 7:30. Wow, I slept more than I have in a long time, and honestly, it felt really good. After everyone washed up, we went to the restaurant. As soon as we walked in, the first thing we saw was Marcia and her children sitting at a table on the far side. She saw us too and waved. The timing was perfect, they had just arrived and invited us to join them. Marcia looked even more beautiful in a charming little sundress that showed off her legs and made her look like a young girl. Damn it, she was a young girl, 27 years seemed young to me. We picked up where we left off at the pool. Everyone seemed to get along very well. The kids talked about kid stuff, and Marcia and I talked about what the kids were talking about. From time to time, we managed to strike up a small adult conversation between ourselves, especially after we ordered and the kids decided to go look at all the stuffed animals and fish hanging on the back wall. So, Marcia, don't you love it here by the lake? I'm jealous that you get to live here all the time. I know, Zach, but I just get lonely after a while. I have my mom, dad, and a couple of staff who I'm friends with, but it's not the same as living a normal life. I've been here for 2 months now, and I know I need to make some decisions and move on. It's so difficult. Well, here it is. Do we now exchange family sorrows or keep a little distance between ourselves? Marcia, if you don't mind me asking, what happened between you and your husband? Oh, the usual stupidity. I caught him having an affair with one of the girls he works with. Jack is a lawyer at a big firm, and they have a lot of attractive young women who love big money. Oh my God, this guy doesn't have the brains to be a very good lawyer. What do you mean, Zach? Well, he is one of the most beautiful, cute, sweetest women I've ever met. Add to that 2 wonderful children who clearly adore their mother, and she adores them. And to top it all off, the father-in-law and mother-in-law in a place like this. If he does something that jeopardizes all that, it shows not only a lack of intelligence but also a lack of maturity, common sense, and many other things. God, I thought she was beautiful before, but now she smiled in a way that seemed to radiate from within, and the place lit up like a sunny day. Her husband must really be an idiot. Zach, thank you. I was feeling a little depressed, and it's nice to hear that someone thinks I mean something to a man. I'm sure your wife is delighted when you say things like that to her. Here it was, an opening to talk about the sad state of my marriage. Marcia made me feel so comfortable that before I knew it, I was telling her the whole story, including how long it had been since we'd made love. I looked down at the table as I said all this, and when I finally looked up, I saw her big blue eyes full of compassion and empathy. Zach, did you ever think that she might be like my husband and have an affair? Bingo! A light went on in my busy head. I had never thought about this before, but now everything started to make sense. Damn it, she might be right, it all really fits. I was just suggesting, Zach. Don't jump to conclusions until you know for sure. I'll tell you how I found out. There are these little voice-activated microcassette recorders that you can buy at Radio Shack. They only start recording when there's sound. You can hide one in your bedroom, one near the phones, and even one in her car if you think she might be talking to someone there. You could also find someone to watch the kids and follow her when she goes to the gym. It would be better to hire a private investigator, but they're expensive, and knowing how much it costs to raise a couple of children, I doubt you can afford it. Well, Marcia, you've definitely given me something to think about, even if I don't want to. It's so depressing to think that you might be right. For some reason, I still love her. I just want everything to be like it was before. Well, actually, I wish things were better than they were, but now I realize how much worse things can get. Trust me, Zach, I understand how you feel. The same thoughts have been crossing my mind since I found out. I think I still love my husband, Brian, too, but a lot of damage has been done, and I need a lot of time to heal and deal with it smartly. But enough of this depressing talk. Tonight, after 9, they'll remove some tables and chairs to make room for a dance floor. Then a small country western band will arrive at 10 and play until 1 in the morning. I love to dance and haven't been able to do it for a long time. Would you do me the honor of dancing with me tonight? My mom and dad have a 5-room house half a mile away and would be happy to look after your kids for us. They could spend the night there, and you could pick them up tomorrow morning around 9. Then we could go into town together and have breakfast. How does that sound? It really did sound good, and we made plans over dinner. The kids were excited about the sleepover, and Marcia's kids couldn't wait to show them their rooms and all their toys. So we went back to the cabin, packed a little overnight luggage for the kids, and then headed to Marcia's parents' house. They turned out to be very nice people and seemed really excited about the night with the kids. Marcia came out of her bedroom dressed in boots, jeans, and a t-shirt. She certainly looked great. She was the kind of woman who would look good in any outfit, and even better without it. Marcia told her parents that she'd be back before 2 in the morning and that we were all going to have breakfast together the next day at 9:30. When we got back to the restaurant, the band was just setting up, so we had time to have a couple of cocktails and talk some more before the music started. I was all set when Marcia stood up and started showing me how to do the two-step. It seemed like there were only 4 dances you had to know to fit in with the crowd: Texas Swing, which was a two-step dance, line dances, such as the Cotton Eye Joe, rock and roll dances, where you dance separately and move around, and finally, my favorite, slow dancing to ballads. Marcia really didn't lie. Once the music started, we didn't take a break until the band went on break. It's good that I'd started my walking program in the park, because even though the place was air-conditioned, with so many people crowded together and all the exercise, I was sweating a little and noticed that Marcia was too. Marcia said she was hot and that it would be cooler outside with the breeze from the lake than inside, so we went for a little walk. I was more than a little stunned when we stopped behind a tree, and she turned her face toward mine and started kissing me. It was like an electric shock. We didn't even exchange tongues, but it was the most passionate kiss I've ever had. If she wanted to cool off, this wasn't the best way to do it. I don't know how long we kissed, but time just stopped. When we finally broke the kiss to catch our breath, we heard the music playing again and went back. We danced non-stop, but the difference was in the slow dancing. Marcia simply melted in my arms and pressed her whole body against mine. They brought 2 ice-cold margaritas to our table while we danced, and between songs, we went back to take big sips, well, maybe more gulps than sips, because they were empty when the band took a break again. We ordered 2 more and drank them halfway before heading outside again. This time, we walked along the path to the lake. We found a spot in a pile of inflatable rings that were lying on the beach, waiting for the next day's swim. This time, the kissing became more passionate, and we started French kissing. When she finally opened her eyes, there was a sparkle in them, and she smiled at me. "You're a dangerous man, Zach. You make me want to have children again." Oh my God, I wasn't prepared for that comment. "Marcia, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. I would love to get to know you better and would love to be with you right here on these inflatable rings, but we both know we're married, and it wouldn't be right. So, unfortunately, I think we better go back and dance some more." "See what I mean?" Marcia said. "Not only do you light my fire, but you're also sweet and a gentleman. That's why I know someone as sweet and considerate as you would be a great dad." Yes, I'm so cute, I thought, consumed by lust. How I managed to retreat and leave that night, I still don't know. I knew that someday, I'd find this moment in the "what were you thinking" file when my memories came back to haunt me. The band was finishing up their last set, and we had 3 final dances before heading out. I walked her to her parents' house. The next morning came quickly, and it was a beautiful day when I drove to pick her and the kids up. The bright sun and clean air lifted my spirits as everyone piled into 2 cars, and we went for breakfast at a cafe buffet they knew about, not far from the road. Marcia's parents were pleasant conversationalists, and it was obvious that they loved children. They talked at length about how nice it was that my older children took care of Marcia's younger ones. They organized games, listened to their stories, and in general, everyone got along great. I admit, this made me proud and love my kids even more. Later that day, we all went fishing on a large pontoon boat that Marcia's parents rented from the resort. They knew all the spots where we could catch a lot of fish, and I was busy baiting the hooks with worms and grasshoppers while Alice and Jim fished with absolute delight. We planned to have a fish dinner at the resort that night, and then it was time for the Big Bear's nap. Later that afternoon, we went swimming in the lake, but we didn't meet Marcia or her children at the agreed time. We went back to Marcia's parents' house, where her father was cooking fish outside in his Creole-style kitchen. He fried fish, potatoes, and onion rings in batter. I knew it wasn't great for the waistline, but boy, was it delicious. I ate as much as everyone else, and the conversation was loud and animated. Of course, in the end, the children got bored with the company of their elders and went upstairs to play with their toys. This was par for the course for the adults, as we drank beer and watched the sun set over the lake. When the stars came out, we helped put everything away and loaded the dishwasher. Then Marcia said she wanted to go for a walk to the lake, and we set off holding hands. "So, are you leaving tomorrow, Zach?" "Yes, unfortunately, we need to. The children must finish school in 3 weeks. After that, everything will be done, and summer holidays will begin. I truly enjoyed my time with you, Marcia, and your family. I'd love to say we'll be back next weekend, but I have no idea how things will play out with Jane. You lit a spark, and I need to figure out what's going on. You still love her, don't you, Zach? Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm not entirely sure why, but I do. I understand. That's how I feel about Brian, too. But the longer I stay here, the more that feeling fades. If absence doesn't make the heart grow fonder, does that mean the love is over? Oh, I'll figure it out someday. I pulled her towards me for a kiss, and the conversation stopped for a while. But when I tried to move her hand toward her breasts, she stopped me. There's no point in moving on if you're not willing to continue, is there? No, you're right. Thanks for stopping me. I'm already confused enough, and the more time I spend with you, the more confused I become. It's time to go home and talk to Jane after I find the evidence, if there is any. That was the last time I saw Marcia on that trip. We had another great breakfast, went for a long walk along the lake, and then spent the rest of the morning and early afternoon swimming lazily by the pool. We packed our things and left around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I hadn't spoken to Jane since that first phone call, and I had no intention of doing so now. The ball was in her court. If she wanted to contact us, she had all the information she needed. The fact that she never called, let alone came and joined us, irritated me the entire trip. What happened to the girl with the energetic spirit and pleasant personality I married? Jim and Alice were exhausted from all the activities and late nights, so naturally, they both fell asleep on the way back, giving me plenty of time for silence and reflection. When I arrived at our house, there was a car parked there that I didn't recognize, a small red sports car, maybe a Nissan. We had a circular driveway that looped in front of the house and led back to the garage. Jane usually parked her car in the garage, and the other half was filled with junk. I parked a little further from the front door to make it easier to unload, turned off the engine, and got out to stretch. Of course, there was no scream of joy. Jane did not rush out of the house to throw herself into my arms and check on the children. This hadn't happened for a long time. Maybe she just didn't hear the car. Before I even opened the door, I heard loud rock music coming from our stereo system. There was no one in the living room, so I headed to the kitchen, and there they were. Jane was wearing loose shorts and a t-shirt, and whoever this guy was, her personal trainer, was massaging her leg as it lay on his lap. One of his hands was on her upper thigh, almost touching the area between her shorts and her leg, while the other hand held her leg by the knee. Since they couldn't hear me over the loud music, they both visibly flinched when they saw me. Jane yanked her leg out of his lap, and he jumped up in panic. "Zach, honey, what a surprise. I didn't think you'd be back so early. This is Ernesto, my personal trainer from the gym. I had a bad muscle strain during my morning workout, and he was trying to massage it. It was pretty funny, considering how quickly she pulled her leg back. He must be a very good massage therapist." I glanced at him. He was about 6 feet tall, in excellent shape with muscular arms and shoulders, jet black hair, dark eyes, and a smirk on his face. I don't want to be stereotypical, but he seemed like a typical Latin lover, not the polished, well-dressed type, but more like the pool guy or the gardener. I nodded and said, "Ernesto, nice to finally meet you. Jane speaks of you with such admiration. She thinks you make her look younger, and maybe you do. Let's see, how old are you? 25? And Jane, you're turning 38 soon, aren't you?" I saw Jane freak out at that statement. Funny how her surprise and embarrassment quickly turned to rage. This was one of those changes that had happened recently. She became angry very quickly and lost patience over minor issues. After staring at me for a while, it finally dawned on her that the children hadn't entered with me. "Where are Jim and Alice? Why didn't they come in with you? Did something happen? Why didn't you call me?" "Don't worry, they're asleep in the car. Although it's nice to see that you're still mother enough to care about them a little. As for the call, why didn't you call? I called you, but you never called back. I even thought that you might change your mind and spend at least one day with us at the resort, but it seems Ernesto wouldn't have had time to flex his muscles if you did that," I said, with mockery and contempt toward Ernesto. He seemed a little angry after that too, probably believing that being macho was his prerogative and no one else should interfere. "Hey man, calm down," he said. She actually pulled a muscle, and I was trying to help. She pays me for this. I don't like your tone, and I think it's time for me to leave. See you at the gym, Jane. With that, he walked out of the house, and I followed him to watch him jump into his little red sports car and speed off. I then woke up the kids, helped them out of the car, and brought them to their mother while I began unloading our luggage. After that, I returned to the kitchen where Jim and Alice were sitting at the table with juice, telling their mother about all their adventures at the lake. I grabbed a can of soda from the refrigerator and joined them. Jane tried to smile and act normal for the sake of the children, but it was obvious she was nervous. So, after a while, I went upstairs and collected all the dirty clothes from our bags to start the laundry. While I was doing this, the thought occurred to me that if Jane and I separated, I would end up doing a lot of the laundry myself. Do I really want this? Of course not, but it wasn't me who pushed us down this path of no return. When I returned to the bedroom, I noticed Jane's purse lying on the bed. I guess now is the time to start playing detective, I thought, looking back at the door and hearing Jane still talking to Jim and Alice in the kitchen. I took her purse and emptied the contents onto the bed. The first thing I noticed was a prescription medicine bottle. I picked it up and looked at the label. Her name wasn't there, Ernesto's name was written in capital letters. The pill was called Phenermin, and there were about a dozen tablets left in the bottle. What the hell is this? I quickly examined the rest of the items and found nothing unusual. I put everything back in her purse except the pills. I took them and went to my home office, where I turned on the computer and went online. Then I did a keyword search for Phenermin. Not surprisingly, it was a weight loss pill that reduces appetite and stimulates metabolism. It had to be prescribed by a doctor and could have serious side effects. Some of them included anxiety, sleep problems, irritability, increased heart rate, and others. Well, now I knew what part of the problem was. I didn't know if our marriage could be saved, but changes had to happen, and I was the one to make them. First, I hid the pills in my closet, in the pocket of a coat I never wore, then got back on the computer and started checking all of our bank accounts and investments. Damn it, I wasn't going to let this nonsense go on any longer. At this point, I didn't know whether Jane had an intimate with Ernesto or not, but I also realized that on one important issue, it didn't matter. Namely, whether true or not, I no longer trusted Jane. Since I had no trust in her, she would no longer control anything or make any decisions. Apparently, she didn't understand that the only reason she was allowed to run the show and make decisions was because I let her do it. After 15 years of marriage, she apparently considered this her inalienable right. Wrong, darling, wrong. You will soon find out how wrong you were. I spent another 20 minutes on the computer going through our finances and making a list of things that needed to be done tomorrow. It was too late to do anything today, but Operation Take Control would begin in the morning. Now I needed to put on my game face and see if I could convince Jane that everything was okay and that she still had the upper hand. When I came back downstairs, Jim and Alice were watching TV, and Jane was preparing dinner. Wow, that was a good change, or at least I hoped the food would be good. Maybe I should help her and make sure of it. Hi honey, do you need any help? What's for dinner? I asked. A quick, scared look at me, then a look of relief on her face. Of course, honey. You know I always love cooking with you, she said. She loves me, a voice in my head said. Zach, you have a big field of mature nonsense in front of you. I looked at the stove and saw ground beef and some onions cooking in a frying pan. One of our large pots had water boiling. I could have guessed spaghetti, her favorite dish to cook. She hated chopping vegetables, so the onions were clearly missing, and there was no garlic or green pepper. So, I took them out of the refrigerator, and soon I had a big pile of all three ingredients chopped into small pieces and added to the ground beef. Jane, still unsure of what I was thinking, didn't say a word while I was doing this but began making the salad on the table. She still wouldn't look me in the eyes and tried to avoid me, which was quite difficult to do in such a small space. The kids told you, of course, but we had a great time at the lake. We'd love for you to join us. The beds were great. The cabin was air-conditioned, and there was a lovely pool if you didn't want to swim in the lake. We ate all our meals outside, and the food was great. There was even dancing and live music in the restaurant after 9 o'clock in the evening, and I know how much you love to dance. Yes, I heard all about it. I think the kids have never had more fun, Jane said. She looked at me, and her face softened a little. She gently said that she should have been there and apologized for not being there. Funny how she didn't mention Mara and her family, which I'm sure the kids talked about. No curiosity about who Mara is and what we did with her. Damn, this can't mean anything good. She must feel guilty, which means there's something to feel guilty about. Damn. Now this only strengthened my intention to implement my plan tomorrow. Who knows how long her repentance will last? In a day or two, if I don't do anything, she'll think she got away with it, and everything will go back to normal, especially if she's been on these pills for a long time, long enough to get used to it. The next week will be stressful, even if I don't do anything else, and believe me, I have many other things planned. Fasten your seatbelts, the plane crash starts tomorrow. Dinner was great, the food was delicious, and the conversation was fun. It was just wonderful to eat as a family again. Now I realize how much I missed it. Can we become a happy and loving family again? Now I knew I still wanted it. Mara was incredible, and despite the age difference, something could happen between us. But Jane and I had been together for 15 years, and we already had a lot of memories, feelings, and intimacy. Two of the ones we developed sat at the table, smiling and chatting as they ate. All I could do was try to put the pieces back together and pray that I was successful. The next morning, I pretended to go to work as usual and waited until Jane left for her job. Then I called work and told my boss that I was having a personal crisis and needed to take the rest of the week off. He was a little upset, but hearing the tension in my voice, he finally agreed. After that, I went to our credit union to review our finances. I opened a separate account in my name only and arranged for my salary to be deposited into it. I also transferred all the money from our savings account to this new account and half the money from our joint checking account. I left enough money in the joint account to cover all outstanding checks and a couple of hundred more on top. My IRA and money market account were in my name, so I assumed they were safe for now, though they might need attention later. I wasn't even sure Jane knew I had these accounts, as she had become so indifferent to our finances as long as there was money in the account for her to spend. I arranged for my new separate account to have no paper checks, debit card only, and all statements would be electronic, without any paper trail. I then set up internet access with a new username and password that Jane wouldn't know. This was the first part of my plan: stop the flow of money. My darling loved money and loved to spend it. Now I realized, after looking at our records, that more and more money was leaving for Ernesto. I wondered how much he charged her for those pills. Next, I went home and unplugged the VCR from the TV, along with all her soap opera tapes, and put them in the attic where she would never find them. She wouldn't go there because she was afraid of spiders and rats and thought the attic was full of them. I was tempted to put the TV in there too, but I didn't want to punish the kids for what she did. Then I had a brilliant idea. I found a small electronic timer that I could plug into the wiring so the TV would automatically turn off at 10 o'clock in the evening and not come back on until 7 o'clock in the morning. I was really proud of myself for this find. The third part of my plan was to visit a lawyer, whom my friend had arranged an emergency meeting with. His name was John Stanford, and he seemed to know what he was talking about, having handled divorce cases for 20 years. He immediately prepared the divorce papers, which made me panic, but then he calmed me down by saying that we would not file them but use them as leverage to get Jane to do what I wanted. He said there was nothing like official documents presented to a spouse to make them understand the seriousness of their actions. The second thing he did was prepare another set of documents to file a lawsuit against the health club where Jane worked out and where Ernesto worked. We would file a claim for damages for their part in destroying my marriage. John said we had a strong case because the club was part of a large national chain, and they would likely offer us a very generous settlement out of court to avoid publicity. John said, imagine what would happen to their membership if every husband whose wife worked out at one of their clubs found out that one of their personal trainers might be having an affair with them. I understood his point of view. The fourth part of the plan was to return home and openly confront Jane, which she probably thought she had avoided. I would tell her everything I had done so far and then hand her the divorce papers. I would give her a few minutes to process this and then present her with a list of conditions she would have to meet for the divorce papers not to be filed. I had a feeling this would cause more than a few fireworks. When I got home, Jane was in the shower, and Jim and Alice were playing with the neighbor kids in the backyard. I changed into shorts and a t-shirt and quickly checked her purse, but didn't find anything unusual. Then I went to the kitchen and got a cold beer to relax a little. After that, I called the pizzeria to order pizza so I wouldn't have to worry about dinner. Everything was ready. Now I just needed to relax and wait for the next 3 hours until the kids went to bed, and then I would change our lives. Those 3 hours really dragged on. Time seemed to slow down, and I was acutely aware of every minute. The kids loved the pizza. I ate a couple of slices and drank another beer, and even Jane seemed to enjoy the food and drink, having a couple of beers herself. Finally, it was time to put the kids to bed, and I let Jane rock them to sleep while I got my papers ready. After I heard Jane say goodnight to the children, I called her downstairs. I waited at the foot of the stairs as she descended, hoping to put on a stern, serious look. "We need to talk," I said. She seemed to recoil a little upon hearing this, and her face showed concern. "Okay, Zach, just let me grab a beer first." "Okay, of course, honey. I'll wait here for you, and we can sit in the living room." She looked so nervous and embarrassed as she walked past me that I followed her a little, although she didn't notice. I don't know why, maybe it was intuition, but I stopped a few feet from the kitchen door and watched her. She took a beer from the refrigerator, but then walked over to the table and opened it. I was surprised when she took a long sip of her beer, but I was shocked when I saw her take a small plastic pill box out of her pocket. Opening it, she took out a small white pill and put it in her mouth. Oh my God, did she take out more diet pills, or did she have another stash besides the one in her purse? Not wanting her to know what I had seen, I quickly returned to the living room and sat in the chair with the papers on the coffee table. When Jane came in and sat down, I started talking. "Jane, I feel like our marriage is in crisis. I've been very upset by the way things have turned out in recent months. You've made independent decisions that have greatly affected our family, and I had no say in these matters. We've always had a problem with your excessive spending and carelessness in managing our finances, but what hurts even more is how you've distanced yourself from the family and spent all your time at the gym. This has hurt not only me but also the children. Besides, you act like you don't want anything to do with me, and we haven't had an intim in over a month. I don't know if this is because you're having an affair with Ernesto or if there's another reason, but since we don't talk anymore, I can't know unless I hire a private investigator to follow you. So, to begin with, did you have an affair?" I could see that she was trying to decide what to do and how to react. She'd been acting guilty and sweet ever since I walked in on Ernesto at the house, but I think her little white pill had started to kick in, giving her the energy and confidence to try and get out of this. "Damn it, Zach," she said loudly, "you don't own me. Just because I decided to spend some time alone to get in shape doesn't mean I'm having an affair. Ernesto helped me lose weight, you should be grateful for that. You have no right to tell me who my friends should be." "Oh, of course, Jane. I received this message from you a long time ago. I don't have the right to tell you what to do, but you have every right to tell me what to do. It's funny, I don't remember this being in our wedding vows. I thought marriage was supposed to be a partnership where we cared for each other and shared everything equally. When important decisions are made that affect a marriage, I thought we should sit down and discuss them together before taking any action. Decisions like spending money when we're on a tight budget or joining a gym and hiring personal trainers, which requires the other spouse to be the primary caregiver for the children. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with you doing these things, but that you shouldn't have done them without consulting your husband. I noticed that you still haven't said outright that you're not having an intimate with Ernesto, but that's okay. At the moment, it just doesn't matter to me as much as it used to. One thing is for sure, if you're sleeping with him, it ends now. If you don't stop, this is what will happen." My voice grew louder throughout my speech, and now I handed her the divorce papers. "What is this?" she asked, stammering. "Just read them, Jane. I'll go for a quick walk outside, and then we'll discuss them." Wow, what a relief to get out of there, I thought as I walked down the street. Being persistent and getting things done takes a lot of energy. However, I felt very satisfied as my tension began to subside a little. I couldn't believe she let me finish my entire speech without interrupting. This was only the first part of the confrontation, but at least it was over. It was probably only 10 minutes since I left, but it felt like hours. When I returned, Jane had moved from the living room to the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, and it was obvious she had cried a little, but I could also see that she was furious. "You're crazy," she screamed. "You went to a lawyer and filed for divorce because I haven't spent a little time with you for a couple of months? Do you want to break up forever? What about the children? This is a community property state. I'll get half of what you own in custody of the children. Is this what you want?" Yes, I had already thought that she would use the children as weapons. She knew how much they meant to me and that it was her best way to control me. John Stanford had already discussed these aspects of divorce with me. He said she would probably get custody unless we could prove she was truly neglecting the children and was a danger to Jim and Alice. But he also said that I would receive very generous visitation rights, given my closeness to them every other weekend, alternating holidays, and a couple of evenings in the park every week. It wasn't what I expected or wanted to happen, but if I was committed to making changes in our marriage, it might be necessary. I hoped she would listen to reason, but I doubted it, especially if I couldn't wean her off Ernesto and his diet pills. "You got it wrong, Jane. I haven't filed for divorce yet. I'm just getting the paperwork ready, so you know I'm serious when I say there need to be changes in our marriage. Regarding custody and property division, if we divorce, I've already discussed this with my lawyer. I think I'll get a much better settlement than you think because we can prove that you've basically abandoned the children, just like you've abandoned me in recent months. But that's not what I want. But it's what I'll do if I have to. So what are these conditions? Do you want to keep me here as a prisoner and force me to serve you and the children? Is that all you need? I'm so glad you asked, honey. Here is my list of conditions that must be met for us to remain married. In fact, these are not just conditions but rather a plan for how we will live from now on. It is impossible to write down all the ways we interact, but I tried to touch on the main ones. So, just because something isn't on the list doesn't mean it's not up for discussion later. I then reached over, took the second set of documents out of the large Ziploc envelope, and handed them to her. I began to read the list out loud. 1. Our finances will be separated as much as possible from now on. This means separate accounts and credit cards. I have already removed my name from our joint account and opened a separate account. 2. Monthly bills, mortgage payments, house, and children's expenses will be assessed and shared between us. Since I earn more, I agree to a 60-40th split. I know you'll want to pay less, but considering you get equal benefits from living in our home, I think it's fair. It would cost you a lot more to rent an apartment and pay your own utilities and so on. 3. We will cancel our gym membership, and you will no longer have any contact with Ernesto. You will also stop taking any diet pills that I don't know about and that are prescribed by your doctor. 4. The VCR has been removed, no more recording soap operas and watching them late into the night. The TV will be turned off and will remain off from 10 o'clock in the evening to 7 o'clock in the morning. 5. If one of us cooks, the other will be responsible for completely cleaning the kitchen, including the stove and floors. 6. Whenever one of us spends money on household items and wants a refund, be it food or other items, a receipt must be provided. The other party can only refuse if it can be proven that it is not a household item. A household item is something that is provided to be shared by everyone in the house or to provide for the children in our role as parents. Thus, washing powder is a household item, but cosmetics that only you use are not. Clothes and shoes for children are household items, but clothes for each of us are not. 7. All money remaining after fulfilling household and parental obligations will be ours, and we can dispose of it at our own discretion, except in cases where this conflicts with the above rules. So you can't buy another VCR, gym membership, diet pills, or anything that might break any of the previous rules. I could see that Jane was unhappy when I read the list. The look of pure hatred was a clear sign. What I couldn't believe was that she allowed me to read all the way to the end before exploding. She was like a compressed ball of nervous energy ready to burst, but she controlled it better than I expected. "Do you really expect me to live like this?" she shouted. "Well, I was hoping you could, because I don't want an alternative. But it's come to this, so yes, I expect you to live like this if we stay together." Well, you're an idiot. Since when do you tell me what to do? Just because I want to maintain my appearance and you don't care that you're falling apart? Should we get a divorce? I take my words back. You're not just an idiot. You're a selfish, fat old fool. Look, Jane, I know it's hard for you to understand that everything has changed, but insults won't help. I still love you. I'm doing this to try to save our marriage. You just don't understand that the only reason you had control over this marriage to begin with was because I loved you and gave it freely. Because of it, I want you to lose weight and maintain your appearance, but most importantly, I want you to maintain your health. You were right that I had let myself go and was unhappy about it. In case you haven't noticed, I've lost almost as much weight as you. I'm just doing it slower. These pills you are taking are unsafe and unhealthy, and in the long run, you won't be able to continue taking them and lose or maintain weight. Zach, why do you always talk about pills? What pills? How do you know I'm taking some pills? It was a little too much for my anger, and I lost control. I walked over to her chair, grabbed both of her hands, and pulled them behind her back where I held them with one hand. Then I reached into her jeans with my other hand and pulled out a plastic pill box. Okay, Jane, since you're not taking any pills, you won't miss them, right? Give them to me. Son of a, you have no right to take my property. Did you take the bottle of pills from my bag? Yes, damn it, I took it. If this is your property, then why was Ernesto's name written on the bottle? It is illegal to give other people the pills you were prescribed. Maybe I should tell the police what's going on. You better not do anything to hurt him, you an idiot. This is not a real prescription at all. He receives them via the internet and sends them by mail. Oh well, this changes everything. Come on, Jane, be serious. You know this stuff is bad for you. I can show you how to lose weight and get in shape without pills, without a gym membership, and definitely without a personal trainer. With that, I went into the kitchen, poured the pills into the sink, turned on the water, and turned on the waste disposer. Goodbye, Mommy's little helper. No, you idiot, son of a, she shouted. I will never forgive you for all this. Forget about night with me. Well, believe it or not, Jane, that's one of the reasons all this is happening. Whether it's because you're sleeping with Ernesto or because of the effect of those little white pills, or whatever, I almost forgot what a night with you was like. Not just intimate, we grew apart in every way. Either we change it, or you know what will happen. Thus was the first shot fired in a battle that turned out to be much larger and lasted much longer than I thought. Jane slept in the guest bedroom that night and every night for the next 2 weeks. I gave John a bottle of pills with Ernesto's name on it to use in our lawsuit against the gym. He was really excited when I told him I found them in Jane's bag. Now we not only had their employee seducing my wife, but also putting her health in danger. John contacted their management and had a preliminary meeting with them early next week to show them what we had. He also hired a private investigator who was able to convince some of the club's employees to talk to him without knowing who he was. He secretly recorded these conversations during a party at a bar they all went to on Fridays. They all said that Ernesto had bragged about sleeping with Jane. It was also known that if his clients complained they weren't losing weight fast enough, he would try to force them to take diet pills to prevent them from quitting him as a trainer. They all warned him that the pills weren't safe and that sooner or later something would happen and he'd get caught, but he was too arrogant to listen. All this time, I was trying to get Jane to talk to me and start working through our differences. However, she was extremely stubborn. When I gave her the first bill for her share of the mortgage and other bills, she refused to pay and told me to go to hell. Instead, I taught her a lesson and changed the locks while she was at work. I made sure the kids were upstairs in their room with the music on loudly before she got home. I thought I'd seen her angry and swearing before, but that was nothing compared to the tantrum she threw when her key didn't work. She knocked on the door and screamed for half an hour before I told her through the door what was going on and that if she wasn't going to pay for her share of the household expenses, she wouldn't live in the house. Finally, she said she'd just get a hotel room with a hot tub and a pool. I then pointed out that her swimsuit, and in fact all of her clothes and most of her cosmetics, were in the house and that she would not be able to take them. They are held as collateral until she pays. This woman really had powerful lungs. I wasn't surprised when a police car pulled up a little later because the neighbors had complained about the noise. They asked me to leave, and I left immediately, locking the door behind me so she couldn't sneak inside. When I explained the situation, I realized that the police thought it was funny and wanted to laugh. However, they remained serious and told Jane that if she did not stop making noise, they would be forced to arrest her for disturbing the peace. She lost her temper again and started screaming at the police, asking how I could keep her from entering her own home and why they weren't arresting me. They explained to her that there were no laws prohibiting one spouse from changing the locks and keeping the other out. They said this was a civil matter and she needed to hire a lawyer and resolve it through civil court. When she started screaming again, they said this was her last warning, and if she didn't calm down, they would arrest her and she would spend the night in jail and pay a $100 fine in the morning. Finally, it got through to Jane's fevered brain. She became quiet, took a checkbook out of her bag, and wrote me a check for the specified amount. I then said that now I would let her inside, and the police left. Jane went to her room and slammed the door hard. The kids came out worried, but I calmed them down and let them watch TV while I quickly prepared dinner. When it was ready, I went up to Jane's room to tell her that she could join us at the table. As I approached the door, I heard her crying, and when I knocked, she just screamed for me to leave, which I did. At the time, I chalked it up to her diet pill withdrawal and thought she'd come around soon. I still believed that the process I had established would work. By the end of the third week after our conflict, I began to notice some thaw in our relationship and we started to talk again. Nothing serious, just normal conversations between her and the rest of us. She also started having lunch with us and did her part to clean the kitchen if I was cooking. After the first week, she began to participate in other household chores, such as doing laundry and helping get the kids ready for bed and school the next day. Jim and Alice became warmer to her again and gave and received hugs and kisses, but still nothing from me. I tried to be patient, but it had been 2.5 months since we had been intimate, so I had mixed feelings when Jane approached me and asked if I wanted to go to a party with her. It was hosted by some of her colleagues from the property management office, where she had been working for 7 years, and I knew most of the people who would be there. I almost refused out of hurt and anger but decided it would be counterproductive. On the night of the party, I waited downstairs for Jane to finish getting dressed. The children were already with Jane's mother, and I was wearing new trousers and a matching shirt, showing off the weight I had lost. When Jane finally came down, it was obvious she had bought new clothes as well. She was wearing a tight, short dress that I had never seen before. It ended 2 or 3 inches above her knees and hugged her figure tightly. The top was a little looser and was held at the neck, attached to the middle of the bodice, with her back open in a V-shape all the way down to her butt. It was the most provocative thing she had ever worn in public, and there was no doubt she looked fantastic, perhaps too fantastic. I wondered, who was she wearing it for? Her husband, with whom she hadn't been intimate for 2.5 months, or was she simply showing off her new figure to her colleagues? Was I just an accessory, or did she really want me with her? As it turned out, my paranoid doubts were not unfounded. It all started 2 minutes after we arrived at the party. After a quick introduction and a brief conversation with the owners at the door, Jane left to join her friends without saying a word to me. I thought, so this is how it's going to be, and regretted agreeing to come. The owner, a woman named Marge whom I had met twice before, noticed I was a little upset by how Jane had just left me. Jane has certainly changed a lot over the past few months, hasn't she? Marge said, looking at me appraisingly. Oh yes, you're right, and not in a good way, at least from my point of view. Well, try not to get too upset. It's obvious she's going to enjoy herself, so you should too. Let me take you around and introduce you to a few people. I did meet some nice people, some of whom I remembered from previous meetings. One guy I knew, Herb, shared my interest in ancient history, and we got into a long conversation about the Mayans. We both visited the ruins in our youth and saw the great temples in person. 45 minutes passed before I started looking for Jane. I finally noticed her on the other side of the room, surrounded by 3 young guys. She seemed to be getting the attention she so desperately wanted. Herb noticed the direction of my gaze. Jane is your wife, right? These 3 started working with us about 3 months ago. They are the rental agents, and Jane needs to get information from them to include in the monthly report for all our rentals. Personally, I think they're a bunch of arrogant idiots, but apparently Jane sees them differently. Jane looks absolutely gorgeous tonight, and you can see how much weight she's lost. But honestly, I liked her better before. She seemed friendlier and happier then. Yes, I know what you mean, Herb. Me too, I replied. I went to the bar, refreshed my drink, and then walked over to Jane and her new friends. Jane had her back to me and didn't see me coming. When I was halfway there, she dropped a napkin on the floor. As she bent down to pick it up, I saw one guy staring at her but in that tight dress, while the other two were staring at her chest. I was liking this party less and less. This feeling intensified when Jane, instead of enjoying my company, soon excused herself to go to the bathroom. The downstairs bathroom was occupied, so I saw her begin to climb the stairs to the second floor. There was an awkward silence, and it was obvious neither of us had anything to say. I excused myself and headed to the backyard to get some fresh air. As I turned to close the sliding patio door, I saw two of the guys walking up the stairs as well. Nothing good would come of this, I thought. I stood there for several minutes, desperately trying to decide what to do. If I burst in there and nothing happens, I'll just alienate Jane even more. On the other hand, if something happens, she will be angry that I interrupted her fun. I thought about it. Why do I always have to make her happy? I'm her husband. She should want to be with me, not someone else. If this isn't the case, do we even have a marriage? Was Jane really trying to repair our marriage, or was she just pretending so I wouldn't kick her out again? To hell with it. I decided I would go upstairs and see what was going on. With that thought, I gulped down the rest of my drink and headed inside and up the stairs, the alcohol burning my throat. I didn't know the layout of the house, so once I was upstairs, I had no idea where the bathrooms were. I figured the bathrooms were usually across from the bedrooms and not in the hallway, so I started opening doors to see what was inside. The first room was very dark, and I couldn't see anyone or anything, so I moved on. Bingo, the next room was dark, but there was a second door inside with light leaking through. As I got closer, I heard voices and laughter. What the hell? Hearing the noise, I opened the door. The toilet seat was down, and Jane was sitting on it, her dress pulled up almost to her groin, exposing her legs. She was holding an object that looked and smelled like a cigarette. One of her coworkers was sitting on the edge of the bathtub, one hand on her bare thigh, moving up to her crotch, and the other reaching for a cigarette. The second guy was sitting on the floor in front of her. Maybe she wasn't. They all jumped in surprise when I opened the door. Jane dropped her cigarette and screamed. Hey man, have you ever heard of knocking? Said one of them. Zach, what the hell are you doing here? Jane demanded. What am I doing here? I retorted. What are you doing here, behind a closed door with two guys, instead of being downstairs with your husband? Do you remember you asked me to come to this party? I was just having fun and smoking. You remember what fun is, don't you? That's why people come to parties. Jane decided to take an aggressive stance. It's okay, honey. I'm tired of being ignored and humiliated, and you no longer have any leverage. Well, the fun is over for today. I'm going downstairs to say goodbye to my hosts and then heading home. If you're not there when I go, then you know what papers I'll be filing next week. With that, I turned around and left the room, heading downstairs. I was proud of myself for not looking back. I immediately found Marge and her husband and thanked them for the party, but told them I was tired and needed to go home. Where's Jane? Marge asked. I think she might stay late and go with someone else, I replied. With that, I walked out the front door and headed to our car. I had just fastened my seatbelt and started the engine when Jane ran out of the house, jumped into the passenger seat, out of breath. I looked at her with disgust and didn't say a word. I wondered what had delayed her. The drive home was in complete silence. Upon arrival, we retired to our bedroom. So much for my hopes of night. I was so angry that I tossed and turned in bed for several hours before I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I felt terrible and depressed. I made coffee and drank almost all of it. I then took a blissfully hot shower for what seemed like an eternity. Feeling almost human, I put on light shorts and a t-shirt and went to pick up Jim and Alice from Jane's mother, where they had spent the night. Jane's mother looked at me and immediately knew something was wrong. She knew this because I had told her that her key no longer fit our house, and she just stared at me, expecting me to give her a new one. We had given her a key in case of an emergency if she needed to pick up the kids or some of their things while we weren't home. I had no intention of discussing our problems with her and quickly took the children away. We stopped at a fast food restaurant, bought sandwiches for breakfast, and then headed to the park. I watched them play for an hour, and then we went for a walk back home. Jane was still sleeping or hiding in her room. At that moment, I felt dead inside and didn't care. The kids asked permission to go to the neighbor's house to play, and I said yes. I then just sat and thought. School ended for Jim and Alice at noon the following Thursday. After that, they would be on vacation. I had accumulated a lot of vacation and extra days. It would be great to go back to the lake and see Marcia and her family again, fish, swim, and just relax. Maybe stay 2 weeks or even longer. Damn it, I just needed to get away from Jane and all this nonsense. It seemed like I could just file for divorce now. Jane showed no signs of regret or remorse and seemed obsessed with preserving her youth, part of which involved hanging out with younger guys rather than the old guy she married. So, I went and collected Jim and Alice and told them we were going back to the lake for a couple of weeks, so they needed to pack all their clothes. I pulled out a suitcase for each of them and quietly gathered my things, trying not to wake Jane. I just didn't want to talk to her right now. Before we left, I wrote a note and told her where we were going and that I was taking a couple of weeks off. The note was short but suggested she really think about what she wants because our marriage was hanging by a thread. I also mentioned that it was clear to me she was no longer interested in me. I concluded that I was angry, tired, disgusted, and humiliated and felt that she had taken advantage of me and made a fool of me. I said we'd talk when I got back and that I wouldn't file for divorce until then. With all the delays, we didn't arrive at Lakeside Cabins until late afternoon. We were lucky, they had several houses available. I booked one for 2 weeks, and we unloaded and unpacked. I realized that the kids would need to go to school on Monday, but I could drive them. Usually, the last week of school isn't a big deal for kids their age, and I'd see if I could get them out early. If I dropped them off on Monday, they would only miss 2.5 days, so it didn't seem like a big deal. We ate on the way, so now it was time for the pool. The kids got into their swimsuits, and when we arrived, we found Marcia and her children there. She seemed very, very happy to see us and gave me a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek. We hugged each other, and the kids embraced as well. It was really nice to be surrounded by friendly people again instead of feeling hostile and angry. Lying in the warm sun, I gradually calmed down and felt my muscles begin to relax. After half an hour of sunbathing, I plunged back into the water and swam 10 laps as quickly as possible. I think I was letting out some remaining anger and making up for lost walks. Feeling energized after the swim, I dried myself off and got dressed. Marcia offered to watch the kids for me, so I headed to the office to make several calls. The first call was to John Sanford, my lawyer. John, this is Zach. I'm afraid we've reached the point we discussed. Go ahead and involve private detectives. Jane is home alone now, or at least the kids and I aren't there. We are located at Lakeside Cabins. I've already given you the phone number here, so call and leave a message if I need to contact you. We'll be here for at least 2 weeks, although I'll be in town next week to take care of some work-related matters. Then I'll make an appointment with you. I think you're doing the right thing, Zach, John said. It may not be what your heart wants, but you can't sustain a marriage if the other party isn't trying. You'll be glad to know that my negotiations with the corporation that owns the gym are going very well, especially after I showed them the bottle of pills you took from Jane with the name of their employee, as well as the recordings of his colleagues' conversations. I think after paying my services and taxes, you will have $600,000 to $700,000 left. What? My brain couldn't comprehend that amount. You must be joking. Why are all of us married men still working? We should just arrange for our wives to have an affair with an employee of a large, wealthy corporation and then threaten legal action. I wouldn't have thought about it if I hadn't suggested it and convinced you to do it, John said. Of course, that's why he's a lawyer and I'm not. The next week and a half passed quickly. The children and I enjoyed life. We swam, fished, walked, played games, and went on trips. One of the trips was to a place where you could rent horses, and I really enjoyed it. I had forgotten how much fun it can be to ride a horse. Another trip was to a cave with tours 3 levels underground. It also had some history. During Prohibition, the first level was converted into a dance hall with hardwood floors, a full bar, and a band that played Western music 4 nights a week. Marcia and I also became much closer friends while the children played and swam. We talked a lot, and I got a much better idea of what kind of person she is, and I think she got to know me better, too. There was a great mutual attraction between us, both physical and emotional, but we never reached the point of night. Perhaps it had a lot to do with the fact that the kids were always with us. However, her parents also watched the kids, so we were able to go to a couple of dinners and dances. We both understood that we had been through a lot of stress and uncertainty, and a relationship based solely on intimate would not be long-term. Marcia had several long conversations with her husband while I was away, and he admitted to cheating on her with 2 women. It was a shock, but it was the lack of feelings on both sides that convinced her their marriage was dead, so she filed for divorce. He agreed, signed the documents, and in 3 months they would officially be divorced. Another surprise was that he showed no interest in the children and gave Marcia full custody. He could visit them any time he wanted, but Marcia had to agree in advance, and she controlled every aspect of their communication. I was very happy for her when I heard this because I knew how much she loved her children. If I could get such an agreement with Jane, I would be delighted, but this is unlikely given what she has become. Over the past 6 months, she had shown less and less interest in motherhood, gradually pulling away from the children. They seemed to rely on her less and less, especially here by the lake where they were having too much fun to miss her. After all, they still had me, the best dad in the world, ha ha ha, and Marcia was a temporary mother to them while they were here. They got along well with her and her children, and with Marcia's parents too. In fact, we stayed long enough that, since we were spending so much time with the owner's daughter, most of the staff now knew us by name and became friends with the kids. In just a few short weeks, lakeside cabins became our second home. However, I knew that I still had some unresolved matters. It was time to leave my hideout and return to the city to meet with my lawyer. I still couldn't comprehend how quickly and completely my relationship with Jane had fallen apart. During our 2 weeks away, there was not a single phone call or attempt to contact us. The Jane I knew 3 or 4 years ago would never have acted like this. With a feeling of sadness and anxiety, I drove back to the city. Marcia's parents kindly agreed to look after Jim and Alice while I went away. I didn't want to take them with me since things would most likely turn unpleasant at some point, and I didn't want them to endure that. They had already been through too much. I arrived a little early for the meeting, but John immediately showed me to his office. He sat me down in a comfortable leather chair and handed me a folder to review. He said it was a private investigator's report and asked me to look it over. When I was ready, we would discuss it. Okay, no more denial. It's time to be strong and end this, I thought. I knew it would be bad, but I didn't realize it would be this bad. The folder contained a diary that detailed Jane's activities every day and every hour. There were photos of her meeting other men, having dinner with them, dancing with them, and finally bringing them to our house. Jane really should have chosen a different location for these meetings. Since I had arranged for a full installation of cameras and microphones in our house for the private investigator, there were 3 or 4 CDs in the package, which I assumed contained videos. The printed photos were more than I wanted to see. I felt the blood rush to my head, the room became hot, and I began to sweat. I felt anger, despair, and sadness all at once. There were more men than I ever imagined. Ernesto was there, as I expected, along with 3 guys from the party, but there were also 3 others I didn't know. My God, how long had this been going on? No wonder we hadn't had much intim, she just didn't need me for that anymore. I felt nauseous and sick. I apologized to John and went to his bathroom, sure that I was going to be sick. Instead, I fell to my knees and started crying. No, crying isn't the right word. It was as if all the stress, sadness, pain, and suffering that had built up in my soul over the past 6 months came out like a hurricane, out of control. I don't know how long it lasted, but then suddenly, it was over. All emotions disappeared, and I felt dead inside, like a robot. I blew my nose, washed my face, and returned to John's office. When I got back, he asked if everything was okay and then wanted to know what I wanted to do. It was a simple question, and I gave a simple answer: file for divorce and let's put our plan into action. John also gave me some good news. He said the lawsuit against the gym would now be settled out of court, and they were simply waiting to file for divorce before firing Ernesto. He was glad they didn't investigate Jane further because, with so many other men involved, we would have had a much weaker case against them. I signed the settlement documents, and we walked side by side to have them notarized. John said I would receive $1,650,000, but the money would not be paid until the divorce was finalized. Thus, Jane would not be able to claim this money, as we lived in a community property state. The only thing that could be in dispute was child custody. Everything else would be divided in half, no matter how much she cheated and how disgusting and vile she was. I had already done a pretty good job of separating our finances, and the only thing left to do was change the locks on the house so she couldn't steal or vandalize my personal property, unless of course she had already done so. It was clear that she considered our marriage complete. At least, I couldn't imagine any other way she could be thinking if her idea of repairing our marriage looked like this. I had a great desire to find out what she was thinking about all this time and how long it had been going on, but I also knew that she had been insincere before. Why would she tell the truth now that I was divorcing her? I believed it all started long before Ernesto. It would have been too much of a leap from the sweet, faithful, loving wife I knew to what I saw in these photographs. Clearly, that sweet, faithful, loving wife was a damn good actress. Maybe some of it was true, but it was also clear that she was a greedy, manipulative, secretive wife beyond the role she played. To be honest, I was always aware of that greedy, manipulative part of her. I just never thought it extended to night or that it was as powerful as it turned out to be. When I arrived home after visiting John, I thought Jane would be at work, so I could take my most important personal property and lock it in the car and then call a locksmith. However, I was unlucky. There was someone else's car parked in front of our house when I pulled into the driveway. I didn't see Jane's car, so I didn't think much of it. I opened the front door and saw something I never expected: Jane having an intim with another man. Oddly enough, my anger did not return. I still felt dead inside. I think all my emotions for the day were spent in the bathroom. I just stood there and watched without saying anything. They both had their backs to me and were unaware of my presence. The music was playing quite loudly, so they didn't hear my car or the door opening. Having never encountered such a situation before, I didn't know how to react. Should I applaud or shout bravo? Instead, I went into the guest toilet down the hall and grabbed a couple of towels. When I returned, I threw them at them and told them to get out of the house. At least I got the satisfaction of scaring the hell out of them. They both screamed and turned around when they saw me. Jane was scared at first, but then an expression of resignation appeared on her face. The guy's fear never left his face. He jumped into his pants, grabbed the rest of his clothes, and ran out the front door as fast as he could. Jane just stood there, much calmer and more collected than she should have been. I don't know why I expected tears or some kind of plea for forgiveness. I guess I was still waiting for the actress, but she seemed tired of playing her role. "Hey, Zach, what a surprise to see you here," she said. "Oh, I can imagine," I replied. "Jane, my dear, could you at least go to the bathroom, clean yourself up, and put on your pants?" With these words, I went to the kitchen, took a beer from the refrigerator, and sat down at the kitchen table. I was halfway through the bottle when Jane joined me, dressed in her jeans. She still acted very calmly, as if it were normal for me to come home and find her with her lover. "So, Jane," I said, "no pleas or sob stories, no stories about how I got it all wrong or how he doesn't mean anything to you?" "No, not really, Zach," she said. "It seems stupid to try something like that. Deep down, I always knew it would end like this. It's obvious that I'm not the woman you thought I was all these years." "Oh, I tried to be that woman. I once thought that I had changed and become her, but now we both know that this is not so." "What do you mean, Jane?" "You played the role for 15 years. A sad expression appeared on her face as she answered, "Yes, exactly. I was a great actress in a great role. Believe me, Zach, being your wife was a great role. You are a good person, and many women want what you have to offer: sweet, kind, generous to a fault, and perhaps the best father I have ever seen. The problem is that even a good actress sometimes gets tired of her role and begins to play poorly. I think I just got tired of playing the same role all these years and started to show my true self. What do you mean by your true nature? You never knew, Zach. I didn't want you to know. Damn, I knew if you found out, it would all be over. How I managed to keep you away from the people who knew me in school and in my early 20s before we met, I will never know. Remember, we met when I was 21. By then, I had years of wild and crazy days under my belt. But you weren't wild and crazy when I met you. You were shy and quiet, just as I remember. Another sad smile, and I looked as if I was naive. You do not understand, this was the beginning of my acting career. I created the image of the woman I thought you wanted and tried to be her. I saw you at the party when you were dating that girl, Mara. Later, when she was talking to her friends, I overheard her describing what a great guy you are and that you were probably the nicest guy she had ever dated, although a little boring. I was at a point in my life back then where I thought a nice guy would be great, despite being boring. Besides, I thought you were cute and fell in love with your smile. But Zach, before I met you, I was with the wrong crowd. We were into a night and having as much fun as we could. I tried to regain control. I would drink a little alcohol, but that was all. A few years later, I went to that party and met you, the good guy I wanted. I saw how you acted around women, and I knew that if I could make you fall in love with me, you would never hurt me and would always try to make me happy. Finally, a tear fell from the corner of my eye, and I saw it slowly slide down her cheek. There was finally some emotion in her voice. Oh, honey, and you did it. You made me so happy for a long time. It was I who let you down. You more than kept your end of the bargain. Damn, now I felt my emotions awakening. This was the last thing I wanted. I felt sorry for her. If she didn't tell me the truth now and continued acting, she should have won an Oscar for the next 10 years. Why would she tell me all these bad things about herself if she's acting? So, Jane, why did you do this? If I made you happy. That's just who I am, Zach. I'm not as good a person as you. I kept it under control as long as I could. I played my part and tried to continue to be happy, but little by little, my old self kept showing up. For 10 years, I stuck together and was faithful, but then I slipped. Remember when you got the flu right before we were supposed to go to a party and you insisted that I go while you stayed in bed? At the party, I met one of the men I had dated. After I started working, he began paying me a lot of attention and tried to get me drunk. I think he succeeded, because we ended up in the back seat of his car. The good wife Jane felt terrible, but the other Jane was extremely pleased. It felt like Pandora's box had been opened. It didn't open completely right away, but it started to open gradually. I slipped again only a year later when I was shopping alone in the city center and met another man whom I had previously dated. He talked me into going back to his apartment to look at some photos of us together, and we spent 2 hours in his bed. It was a combination of guilt and excitement, but the excitement began to take over. Jane, I said, if you limited it to one mistake a year and I never found out about it, then everything would be all right. Well, not okay, but you know what I mean. But over the past 6 months, you've done more than deceive me. You've cut me and the children out of your life. Why did you do it? She shed a couple more tears. Zach, I have no excuse. It was just selfishness. I got back together with the second guy a couple of months later but didn't cheat for over a year. I gained another 10 or 12 pounds and felt very unattractive. I went to a happy hour with the girls from the office, and they didn't even notice me. I think I must have become depressed about being a good wife and mother. I thought I would, but then I wanted to relive my youth. For some reason, I thought that if I let the old me out again, I would be young again. Since you weren't part of this life, I think I started to regress. The same thing happened with the children. I felt desperate, and that's when I started working out at the gym. And yes, I had an intimate with Ernesto from the second week I was there. I lost weight, looked better, and became more confident. Then Ernesto suggested I take these pills, and I started making more and more bad decisions. I'm not looking for excuses. I did what I set out to do. Ernesto and his pills were just something that happened along the way, although I deeply regret going crazy and treating you and the children so badly. After that, when you kicked me out of the house and the cops came, I just wanted to take revenge on you. So, I started taking afternoons off and not telling you, going to bars in the big hotels near the airport. Pandora's box was almost completely open when you left with the kids after the party. I knew it was over. Even though you had some chance of meeting again, I knew that if you knew even half of what happened, you would divorce me. You have too much pride to stay with someone like me. I really got depressed after you left and opened the lid of Pandora's box completely. I hope you never find out what happened in the last 2 weeks. I'm even embarrassed to tell you about it. The tears started to flow, rolling down her face with a hint of hysteria in her voice. Zach, please don't try to stop me from seeing Jim and Alice. I know. They belong to you, but please let me visit. Don't try to shut me out. I love them, even though I don't show it. Damn it, why did she have to do this to me and herself? I was all set to pursue her furiously, but now I didn't want to. There were still a lot of women out there that I could fall in love with and marry. She's just so confused in her head. I did the unthinkable. I took her in my arms, hugged her, and kissed the top of her head. It's okay, Jane. We'll be better off this way. As my last act as a good guy in this marriage, we can get a nice divorce. You can see your children whenever you want, if you agree in advance. It doesn't conflict with anything that's going on, and none of your guys are around. They still love you and want to see you. However, I want you to go to the doctor and get a full examination. He'll do an STD test, and I'll do the same. Also, tell him about those diet pills and ask him to help you get rid of them. You're still on my insurance, so most of it should be covered. This is my price for seeing the children. Get well, only have protected intim, and don't expose your children to any aspect of your nightlife. Okay? Okay, Zach. Thank you. Thank you so much. I stayed and talked to her for another half hour. It was mostly small talk as I tried to calm her down and make sure she understood what I was saying and that she wouldn't get upset again. After collecting a few things I had come for and some more clothes for myself and the children, I left her in a much more stable mood. I stopped the car and used a payphone to call John Randolph. I told him that everything had changed and that we should hold off on our plans. An appointment was made that day to discuss how I wanted to amend the divorce papers. I then called Jane's mother and told her that Jane and I were separating and getting divorced and that Jane needed her. She was surprised and angry and started asking me a lot of questions. I interrupted her and told her that Jane could answer all her questions, but she needed someone with her right now. After that, I thought I might have made a mistake by involving her mother in all this, so I called Christy as well. Christy was a close friend from work. They met at some girl's party, and perhaps she already knew what was going on. I told her to come to our house immediately, that Jane needed her and would understand after talking to her. There was a bar right across the street from the payphone, so I pulled into their parking lot, walked in, had a couple of beers, and turned on the jukebox while waiting to see the lawyer. It made me feel a little better, and I was in a good mood when I talked to John. Against his advice, I decided to give Jane the house and car. I also had about $125,000 in cash in various accounts, and she was going to get $10,000 plus whatever she had left in the account. The planned distribution of photos and videos to her friends and family to embarrass her was also canceled. Right now, I didn't feel the need for revenge and just wanted to put it all behind me as quickly and with as little conflict as possible. Wanting to change my mood again, I self-medicated by stopping at the mall and doing some shopping for everyone at the lake. Mostly, it was clothes and games for both mine and Marcia's children, but I also gave Marcia a t-shirt and several pairs of earrings, and her parents some movies for their VCRs. Everyone was happy to see me back in the cabins, but when I started handing out gifts, I was Mr. Wonderful, kisses and hugs all around. It lifted my mood significantly, and I even started to have a little fun. After things had calmed down a bit and the kids had gone to play, I told Marcia and her parents what had happened. They sympathized with me, and Mara gave me another big hug. Then her parents invited us to stay with them until the end of the summer, and I agreed. I was offered a very good deal on renting a cabin and began to relax again. The next week was one of the best weeks of my life. It was late nights, fun in the sun, good food, and either playing with the kids at night or going for walks with Marcia. Marcia and I still didn't have intim, but we did pretty much everything else. I really think I liked kissing and hugging more than anything else. On Friday evening, we made arrangements with her parents, who left the children with us, and Marcia spent the night with me in my cabin. The following week, I returned to work with great reluctance. It was a long commute, but it was worth it considering who I would have to spend time with when I got home. No complaints from Jim and Alice. They were having a great time, getting more attention and having more fun than ever while living in the city. During the day, Marcia and her parents acted as surrogate parents, and in the evening, I came to their home. The motel and restaurant staff also became attached to them, looking after them and spending time with them. John Randolph called my office from time to time and kept me informed of what was going on. Once Jane received the documents, she immediately signed the papers and did not dispute anything. I received full custody of the children but gave her very generous visitation rights because it was an amicable divorce. John was able to bring in a judge he knew to expedite the legal process. 3 weeks later, we were divorced, and I became a single man again. Almost immediately after the divorce was made official, John called me and said he had a check for me from the corporation that owned the health club. He said it amounted to $1,666,500, as he had previously told me. This was after he received his fee and 15% was withheld for income tax. I met him the next day and deposited the check in the bank. To make it seem real, I asked them to give me $5,000 in cash. Looking into a briefcase full of stacks of hundreds, 50s, and 20s was an amazing sight. Back in the car, I started driving without knowing where I was going. I returned to my old house, parked outside, and just watched for a while. All these emotions rushed through me like a freight train. I saw Jane's car and knew she was home. It was hard not to think about the last time I walked in on her unannounced and what she did, but I called her friend Christy a couple of times and knew that this time it wasn't what I'd find. Jane had reformed, went to counseling for an intimate addiction, and hasn't been with anyone since I last saw her. The time had come for her to meet the children for the first time, so I decided to go and knock, arranging it with her. She quickly opened the door as if she was waiting for me, and before I could protest, she hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. I could hardly believe how much she had changed. It was almost as if she were the woman I once knew, but there was a difference that hadn't been there before. Things were awkward at first, but before I knew it, we were having a really good time talking and sharing what was going on. I already knew most of this from talking to Christy. She took the settlement in cash, paid off the car note, refinanced the house payment at a lower interest rate, and paid down part of the principal. As a result, she had a payment she could afford from her salary. She and Christy had become so close that when Christy's apartment lease was up in a couple of months, she planned to move in with Jane and rent a room, which would also help Jane financially. It couldn't happen soon enough because money was very tight, and she was living solely on her salary. For the life of me, I still didn't understand why, but I felt sorry for her. Why did I even feel a little guilty when it was all her fault? Who knows, but I did. After we had talked for half an hour and had a Coke, I stood up and said that I had to go. We had already decided that the children would visit her next weekend. I would bring them to her on Friday night, and she would return them to the lake on Sunday afternoon. Since there was a lot of money involved, I took a briefcase with cash with me because I didn't want to leave it in the car. Picking it up, I gave in to impulse, turned my back to her, opened it so she couldn't see inside, and took out a roll of $50 bills and another roll of $20s. There were 10 bills in the stack, so it was $700. Taking my briefcase again, I turned around and gave her the money, telling her to make sure she and the kids had a good time. The look on her face made me feel good, and the kiss she gave me made me feel even better. I guess I just wanted everyone to love me. Money was only important to me for what it could do, and if it could make someone I loved, and the mother of my children, happy, then it was put to good use. When I left the house and drove away, I couldn't help but feel melancholy. I didn't know what the future would bring and whether Marcia and I would become closer or not. My financial future was certainly in good shape, but if I could get back what I had lost and not have to endure all the pain and trauma I went through, I would. Sometimes things change but otherwise remain the same. They tell me that change is inevitable, but change is not always good. What do you think of our story today? I think this story is quite interesting in plot and action sequences. What is your impression of the story? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.